In this video, I'm going to go over graphing sine and cosine. Sine's graph, its full graph, if you were just to graph y equals sine x, starts at the origin. It goes up to 1, goes back down to 0, goes down to -1, and then goes back up to 0. This is -1, this is 1. Oh, sorry, opposite. This is +1, and this is -1. So, when you label your axes for this particular graph, it always starts at 0. Here is pi over 2, halfway is at pi, this is at 3 pi over 2, and this is 2 pi. Because one full curve for sine in this formula happens at 2 pi. Now, the formula y equals cos x is the basic parent function for cosine. It's still going to be labeled 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi on your x-axes. And it starts at 1, then it goes down to 0 at pi over 2, then it goes to -1 down at pi, then it goes back to 0 at 3 pi over 2, and back to 1 at 2 pi. So this is the graph. So cosine is one big valley, and sine is a mountain and a valley for one full curve. Now the reason why we pick 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi as our x scaling is because this represents 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270, and 360. And again, 360 just refers to a full circle. And remember, our famous circle that we're referring to is that thing called the unit circle. And that also kind of tells us why the maximum is 1 and the minimum is -1, because that's what your radius is in the unit circle. There are 3 parts of the equation for y equals a sine bx and y equals a cos bx. There is the amplitude, which is the a value. It's actually the absolute value of a. This is your distance from your midline. Okay, so it's your distance from whatever this middle line is. So this is A. However far up you go and however far down you go. Frequency is the absolute value of B. B is here, and obviously A is here. What frequency is, it tells you how many full curves you have between 0 and 2 pi. The reason why we focus on 0 to 2 pi is because 2 pi represents 360, and that just refers to a full circle. So frequency, if you had 0 and 2 pi, it tells you how many waves of sine or cosine you have. So for example, this would be 1, and that would be 2. 2 waves of sine. Or you could do cosine. And so I could have 1, 2 waves of cosine. That would represent a 2 for frequency. Okay, now period is the formula for 2 pi over the absolute value of b. What period does, it tells you how long it takes to get a full curve. Okay, so for example, if I had a sine graph, a full one, and it ended at 2 pi, that would be a period of 2 pi because it took me 2 pi to get a mountain and a valley. Or you could have a sine graph where it takes 4 pi and in the middle is 2 pi. So that would be a period of 4 pi to get a mountain and a valley. For this graph, it says 3 sine x. So when I graph this, I'm going to make sure that I have 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Now, what I notice is that my a value is 3, and my b value is 1, which tells me that I'm going to see only one full curve between 0 and 2 pi. My a value tells me that I'm going to go up to 3 and go down to -3. Now, sine starts at the origin, so my first point will be here. At pi over 2, I'm going to have a maximum of 3, then down to pi, and then down to my minimum of -3, and then up to 2 pi. And this is my curve for this graph. And again, I only saw one curve from 0 to 2 pi because my b value is only 1. Also, my period makes sense to be 2 pi over 1, meaning that it would take 2 pi the distance from here to here to get one full sine curve. This is y equals 2 cos x. So just like the last graph, I'm going to do 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. For this graph, a is 2. So that means that my graph is going to go up to 2 and down to negative 2. B is also 1 here, meaning that, again, your period is 2 pi over 1, so it would just be 2 pi, meaning that it would take only a distance of 2 pi to have my full valley of cosine. So cosine always starts at its maximum. I'm only going to fit one curve in this distance, so I'm going to go down to pi over 2 at my 0, then negative 2 at pi, back to 0 at 3 pi over 2, and up to 2 again at 2 pi. And there's my cosine curve for this graph. Now this is where things get a little bit interesting because my a is 3 and my b is a half. Since b is a half, this means that my period is equal to 2 pi over a half. And that means if I keep, change, and flip, my period is 4 pi. So that means that when I do 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi, I'm only going to see half of my cosine curve at 2 pi. To get my full cosine curve, I'll have to go all the way up to 4 pi. So this graph will go all the way up to 3. It'll start at 3 because it's cosine. Remember, cosine starts at its maximum. Now, I'm only going to see half of my cosine curve at 2 pi. So that means that here, remember, a full cosine curve looks like this. At 2 pi, I would be at my minimum, and at pi, I'd be at 0. So I'd only see this downward part of the valley. If I wanted to continue it, I would have to go all the way to 4 pi to get my full curve. The next one, my a value is 4, and my b value is 2. Now this means I'm going to see two full curves between my distance of 0 and 2 pi. But how long will it take me to get one full curve? To get one full curve, all I have to do to figure that out is do my period. So I do 2 pi over 2. So it would take a distance of pi to get one full valley. Okay, that means that I'm going to go to 4 for my max, because this is a cosine curve. I'm going to see one full cosine curve at pi. So that means I would end at my maximum and be at my minimum of negative 4 at pi over 2. And between these two things, I would have zeros perfectly halfway. So that's one full cosine curve, and at 2 pi, I'll have another one because my frequency, my b value is 2, telling me that I'll have two full cosine curves between 0 and 2 pi. But my period is only pi. That means I'm only going to see one cosine curve at pi. The next one, my a value is negative 2, but that tells me my amplitude is simply just 2, because remember, amplitude is an absolute value. All that negative tells me really is that it's a reflection. Okay, b is 2, which means I will see two cosine curves. Oh, no, I'm sorry, sine curves for this one, between 0 and 2 pi. So I'm going to do 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So again, just like the last one, if I wanted to find my period, I would do 2 pi over 2, telling me that it would take a distance of pi for one full sine curve. So from here to here, I'll have one curve. So a few things. First off, it's going to go up to 2 and down to negative 2. It's going to start in the downward position because of this negative. So it's going to go down to negative 2, then go to pi over 2, and then go up to 2. And again, there's one full curve between 0 and pi because my period is simply pi, meaning one full curve between 0 and pi. All right, now I can finish my graph by just getting the rest of the curve. I need to fit another full curve between pi and 2 pi because my frequency is 2, meaning I should have two full sine curves between 0 and 2 pi. So I'm going to end my sine curve there. I'll be in the middle here. I'm going to go downward and then be upward here. And that's my equation graphed.